Hey guys, and welcome back. As promised last time, during this video we're going to be talking about bugs, and by the end of this video you should be able to know what a bug is, know the anatomy of a bug, like what it consists of. We will together write a bug from scratch. We will find the bug and we will write it. I mean, I've obviously found the defect before this video just to showcase, but you should be able to get familiar with the whole process of finding a bug and documenting it. And it's very important to know that, again, in this video we're going to be focusing on a completely tool agnostic approach, as in you will not be dependent on any sort of tool when you write a bug. You could easily provide a decent bug report if you only had a piece of paper and a pen, and this way, regardless of what kind of company you end up in and regardless of what kind of tools they use, you should always be able to apply the skills and the knowledge that you will gain during this video. So stay tuned and let's get right in. Okay, so first let's quickly understand what a bug is. So a bug is a product not functioning the way it should be functioning, or functioning the way it shouldn't be functioning. So in a nutshell, it's really just a malfunction, and it can be applicable to any product. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the IT industry, or it doesn't necessarily have to be a software bug. It could be related to a house, like if a new house was constructed but there are cracks on the walls, that could be a bug. It's a defect in the house. And by the way, in software as well, defect and bug can be used interchangeably. So if you have a website where there is a button which should be logging you in after you provide your credentials, and it just doesn't do that, it presents you with some meaningless error or even a meaningful error, but it just doesn't perform its function, that would be another bug. Literally any sphere you can think of, or any product you can think of, which doesn't behave as it should be behaving, or does things which it really isn't designed to be doing, which harms the user experience, that could be considered a defect. Here it's also worth noting that bugs can be of different types. So just as you have different types of testing, as we covered in one of the previous videos, like you have functional test types, you have non-functional testing types, you also have different types of defects, exactly the same as like equivalent to the testing type. So you could have, if you're performing non-functional tests, you could, the results of the defects that you will find would be non-functional defects, and the same is true also for functional defects. To give you just a quick example, if, for example, you have a website which you are running some performance tests on, for example, you're just measuring page load times, and you just go to the website, you enter the URL, you hit enter, you go and it loads in 20 seconds, that would be a bug, that would be a performance issue, and thus it would be a non-functional issue. And then if you have, for example, again, a website where there is a button which should, upon clicking on it, should display some sort of an image or I don't know what, but when you click on it, it just doesn't do it. It either is completely unresponsive or throws some sort of an error at you. That's also a bug, but this time it's a functional bug. So any type of testing that we have covered before would produce equivalent types of defects. It doesn't really matter that much, because a defect is a defect and it has to be fixed, so long as it is agreed with the whole team that you're working in that it's worth fixing it, or it doesn't, or it does a lot of harm to the user experience. A defect really is a defect, but it's just worth keeping this in mind in case you're asked about this during your interviews, etc., etc. Cool. Now let's really explore the anatomy of a defect, and we will basically write up a bug together. We will find the bug together. I've obviously already found one just for the sake of showing it to you during this video, but we will explore, we will find the bug, but then we will create the bug together, and then you will get familiar with all of the different pieces of info that you need to be including there. Right, let's get right in. Okay, so here we have a website. I recently stumbled upon this defect when trying to share this website with a friend of mine. So this is a website that I was using when I was a student back in the day, studying for my SAT. It's basically something that would help improve your English vocabulary, just to prepare for this test. And the whole idea here was, at least back in the day, that you can come here, you see some flashcards. In one, on one side it will show you the word, in the other with the explanation, and then you have some quiz. So I came to this website. I was like, my friend was telling me that he needs to improve his vocabulary, and I was going to send this to him. I found this website. I've used it like maybe 10 years ago, and it was really good. So I was like, okay, it's very simple. It would be a bit old school, but what you do, you come here, you click on the flashcards, and then it will show you the flashcards, then you can go through some quiz. Then I clicked on it, and this is what happened. So what happened here is that this website doesn't do what it was doing before anymore. It's basically right now it displays this error. It says Adobe Flash Player is no longer supported, and it's a long story why this is not supported. Adobe Flash Player wasn't really safe to use, and they just discontinued it. None of the browsers pretty much that I know of at the moment support this. Maybe I would be wrong, but doesn't matter. Right now I'm using my Google Chrome, which is a very common browser, and this website does exist. If you go to this address, you will find it, and but in the end it doesn't do what it should be doing. So if we're gonna simulate the situation, right? So if I were to report this defect to someone so that they fix it, and remember that's the aim of what we would be doing as testers, right? We report the defect so that they can fix the bugs and we will improve the user experience. Here is what we would be doing. And again, let's assume that we only have a piece of paper, in this case a Word file. I'm going to open a Microsoft Word file in here, and we are going to open a blank document, and we're going to start typing. So remember, with a test case, the structure is quite similar to a test case, and it consists basically of a summary. Let's firstly outline the anatomy in here. It would consist of summary, it would consist of a description, which would be like more detailed description, yeah, rather than the summary. Then you would have some other information, which we will review a little bit later in like a minute or so, but for now I'm just going to drop this here because the key parts in here are just summary and the description. Okay, so back in the day, from one of my colleagues that I was working with, it was a really long time ago, I learned a very simple formula which is super effective when it comes to writing good summaries for defects. You might see in some cases very short ones, like, I don't know, clicking a button doesn't work, clicking a button results in an error, for example, yeah, error. Or even more horrendous ones, like just error on website or something like this. And sometimes it's confusing to understand how much of a summary is enough in here, so you're either too short or you're too long, etc. Because a summary is really just aimed at giving a brief understanding what the defect is about. So a good formula that I learned back in the day is to write 3 things in the summary of your defect, and if you write them, then you have very good chances that it will be well readable and the people would understand it from the first glance. So you have to write the problem, you have to write the action, and you have to write the location. So if these 3 things are present in your summary, the defect summary is going to be descriptive enough. And now let's try to translate this into a proper English sentence in here. So what did we do? We went to this website. Let's look at our problem. Yeah, the problem is that when clicking on the flashcards button in here, we receive an error message. What is the action? What did we do to get there? And that is, we came to this website and we clicked on the flash. So the problem is that we're getting an error. The action is we are clicking on this flashcards button, and the location is this URL, this website, yeah, or this page on this website. So let's write it just like that. So we're gonna say an error message, or pop-up, or really a pop-up with an error message is displayed when clicking. So this is your problem. Let's highlight this in different colors so it's very clear. And then your action is when clicking on the flashcards button. This is your action. And now all we're lacking is the location. highlight this in orange. When clicking on the flashcards button on, I mean, you really, like, if you were really testing this website and you would have a bunch of places where you write up bugs, like different things on this page where you're writing up bugs, you wouldn't every time be pasting the URL. You would just say, I don't know, the main page or the home page. So we could say here on the home page, but just for the sake of this exercise, and that way you wouldn't have to be dropping large URLs in the summary of the bug, if that makes sense. But in this case, just for the sake of this exercise, let's just do by the book. So we will say on this website. So a pop-up with an error message is displayed when clicking on the flashcards button on this page. That's it. That's the summary of the bug. So now, someone would clearly need more information in order to be able to reproduce these bugs, in order to get some more detail on what kind of error you're getting, etc. But if I had like 100 bugs on this page and all of them were of different nature, I would just be able to read this one and understand what really the bug is in general about. And then I would dive deeper into further information. Cool. All right, so this is the summary of the bug. And now let's get into the description. So the description would normally consist of 3 very, very important elements. One is the steps to reproduce the bug. The second is the expected result. Some people use this in different places. What I really like myself is to have the actual or observed result, and to have the expected result at the bottom. Now let's explore what each of these are. So, steps to reproduce are exactly as the word suggests. What kind of steps do you perform until you receive or until you observe the issue that you're trying to report? This is basically a more detailed breakdown of this step, of the action step. Now, in case of this specific defect, it's kind of obvious, and even this kind of summarizes it when clicking on the flashcards button. So you could say just click on the flashcards button, and you could deduce it, right? You would come here to this website and you would click on the flashcards button. But in cases where the defect you're trying to make someone else understand is much more complex and is more nested, for example, or you need to really like click a couple of things until a certain precondition is met and then you do other things, then you would have to break it down a little bit more. So let's just use this example here to illustrate what we mean. So the first step really is, I mean, I'm not going to go as deep as say turn on your computer, you know, bring up your browser and things like that. So we're going to assume that we already have our browser open, and we're going to just go with the first step, which would be to navigate to or go to, doesn't matter. Let's make it simple. Let's just say go to this page. This is where it all started, right? So first we went to this page, and then we're gonna say, oops, I don't know why this is orange. Let's change the color to black. And then we're gonna say our second step is, I mean, let's just break it down for the sake of the exercise, yeah? We can just say, observe that under the SAT, whatever this section is, let's just grab this. SAT GRE vocabulary prep section, there are flashcards buttons, and then here you could say click on any of the flashcards button. So this, on this simple example, seems a bit too primitive and overcomplicated, but if someone follows these steps, it's unlikely that they will miss what you actually performed yourself to observe the issue that you have observed. And as I mentioned, in many different cases, you might want to not think that someone would just assume a step before they're able to reproduce the defect, and you want to explicitly write anything that a person has to be doing in order to see what you saw as well. That's kind of key in here, and that's why it's worth breaking it down. So now we've completed our action step in here, and what we're going to be doing next is we're going to be outlining or explaining what we saw. So this is your problem part. So we're going to break down the problem in here. And here we just said a pop-up with an error message is displayed, right? So what we would do is we would say exactly the same thing, but a little bit more broken down, so that a little bit with more details, so that the person then reading the description can exactly see or exactly understand what kind of error it is, how it appeared, etc. So we will say, okay, let's try to reproduce again to refresh our memory. So we click on it, then a pop-up window. This is not really, this is a new window, right? It's a pop-up, yeah. So a new pop-up window appears, and there is an error message on the screen which says Adobe Flash Player is no longer supported. And we're going to write just that. So we're going to come here, we're going to say a pop-up window appears, and with an error message which reads, and then we're gonna just write what we saw in here in the error message. Okay, it doesn't let me to copy. Let's get back. What does it say? Adobe Flash Player is no longer supported. So Adobe Flash Player is no longer supported. Perfect. So there you go. Now this, you could have not fit all of this in a summary, right? This is usually supposed to be a one-sentence thing. If you were to fit all of this in a summary, it would look like one big mess, like one big chunk of text, and it would be very hard to read. So we basically just leave all of we put a short description of the problem in here, then we expand on it, like describing what actual error message we have seen, etc., in the observed result. So this is where you describe the problem. Cool. Then in the expected result is what were we expecting to see, just like as the word suggests. So what was the design functionality, or if there is no specification for this, which is our case right now, we just observed this issue as a regular user of this platform, and let's say we knew who is behind the platform and we wanted them to fix this, we would write what we would want to see instead. So we don't have much more information. I mean, I have more information because I remember how this used to look like, etc., but we're not going to get there right now. So all we're going to say is we would be expecting to see in one form or the other some flashcards to be teaching us more vocabulary. So we're going to come here and we're going to say orange again. So we're going to say the flashcards for the section or for the quiz. So these flashcards are per quiz. So the flashcards for quiz 1 for the section quiz should be displayed instead of an error message. Yeah, really, you don't even have to write instead of an error message, because this is all that we have to care about in terms of what we expected to see, right? Perfect. Okay, so we've got our expected result in here as well, and that's it. So these are the very key pieces of information that you actually need to write, like in text form. But as I mentioned, there is more information to include in here in a defect to make sure that we are providing absolutely all of the necessary pieces of info, and also a few other things which we'll get to shortly. So first one could be some sort of an illustration, yeah? So additional kind of visual information. It could be a screenshot, it could be a video, it could be a log of an error if it's a more technical defect, but don't worry about that right now. So let's say we can just say visual information is optional. It's very helpful to provide this for a quality bug, and I would very strongly recommend for you to, wherever possible, to be able to do that. And a screenshot would look something like this. So you would basically come here, you see the error, you take a screenshot of the whole thing, just like this, and then you drop it. By the way, guys, I'm sorry, my screen is a bit wide, and the software that I'm using to record the video is only sharing part of it, but I'm hoping that you're able to see everything. Yeah, I can see that you can see everything. Anyway, so we grab the screenshot, we drop the screenshot here. Now, if someone wants to also see what kind of error we're getting, they're also able to visually see it. Then you have, just like with test cases, you could have preconditions. One sec. So if you remember correctly, oops, what's going on? Yeah, so if you remember correctly, if you remember well, we did have preconditions on test cases. So these are things that we don't want to repeat every time when we're writing our steps, but we want to define once and then we use every next time. So that's exactly applicable also in case of defect. So we're going to write an example of a precondition in here. We're just going to make it up. Could be the user is on this website, so we don't have to write it every time again. So if you could say here, the user is already on this page, then what this could do for you in future, like in terms of helping you and the impact it will have, is it would just eliminate this step in here. So your first step would just start with this one, observe that and you would already have a precondition defined in here. So we're going to write in here that this is our precondition. This is, I'm pretty much repeating what I've said during the test case preparation video, but I just want to make sure that you understand that the same concept also applies in here. Then you could also have some additional information related to the environment where this defect was found. So in our case, this is things like the operating system or the browser that you're using, or even the version of the browser. In many cases, this information can become very helpful to the developers when they're trying to fix it. For example, if a certain defect can be observed on one browser but would not be observed on another browser, or on one operating system and not on the other, etc., etc. And we will also explore the concept of test environments deeper in one of the next videos. But for now, let's just assume that we're providing some basic information on what is the setup that we have. So we're running a Windows. So let's say environment information here, and the info that we will be providing here is basically, we can say OS is Windows OS, and we can say that the browser is Chrome. And if you would even want to go further, you could just check out the version of the browser, wherever it is, yeah, here, and it would show you the version of the browser, so you could also drop that in there in case it is applicable. We're just going to do it for demo purposes, but there are a lot of cases where this could become quite useful. Perfect, okay. And just to explain to you quickly how this can be important as well, just like with precondition, or how could this make an impact. So say you're like, okay, and this is what I actually did. I was like, okay, this is not supported on this browser, maybe a Chrome thing, maybe I Google how to re-enable Adobe Flash on Chrome, and there are ways where you can hack it. But let's say you're like, okay, fine, I want to check out to see if the same issue is applicable on Internet Explorer. Given that it is alive still. So we're gonna go to Internet Explorer, we're gonna find the same website, we're gonna click on this flashcards button, and we're gonna see that it actually the issue is valid in here, but it's just displaying it in a different way. We're not getting the error message displayed, the flashcard is also not displayed. So this issue is valid also here, but slightly differently. So what we could do in this case, we could say that the issue is valid also on Internet Explorer, and we could add a note in our observed result here to say, note that on Internet Explorer the flashcards, the error message is not displayed, even though the flashcards still don't function. Hope this makes sense. So we're just expanding our description slightly in here to say that, to the actual result here, to say that this is also applicable in Internet Explorer, but it's slightly different on Internet Explorer. You never know. This information might become handy for a developer when they're trying to fix it. Perfect. Okay, and then other than environment information, you can have some other meta information, which we will write here just like that. So meta information, and this would be stuff which will help you manage the defect. So if this was, obviously in real life you're not going to be using a pen and a paper, you're going to be using different types of tools, but all of them will provide a certain interface for you to be able to work with some other info related to the bug. So this information is not necessarily relevant in regards to helping someone understand what the bug is, but this is basically just to manage the bug. And we will talk about the bug's life cycle and how bugs are being managed, triaged, etc. in a later video. But to give you a few examples in here, what this could be is for example, what version of the software was this found? Yeah, so let's see. In our case, we don't really care because this is really a user experience bug which we have found on our own, and there is no such information in here. But let's say we were developing this ourselves, this website, and this would be our version 1, and then we fix this defect, we produce one more version of this whole website, of this whole software, then we would call it version 2. So this would be just simple information which will help developers locate exactly which of the last things that they did caused this issue to happen, right? So this is one thing in a nutshell. So let's call it, I don't know, nominally this is our version 1.0.0, for example. It wasn't indicated there. And there you could also have a bunch of other things, like you could have some labels to label them. So for example, we want to, for every defect that we raise related to the flashcards, we just want to use a label called flashcard. So it's then easier for us to just group in some way all of the defects related to flashcards. This is what I mean when I say meta information, yeah? And so on and so forth. You can have really a bunch of things. You can either define custom meta information and use it for as long as it helps the whole project, and it also helps you to better manage the defects once you raise them. But two things which are extremely important in here, which you will definitely also be asked about during your interviews, I want to mention specifically, and I want to talk about them briefly. Those things are the severity of the defect and the priority of the defect. So these two things are still considered to be meta information. This would be something that just helps understand how to manage this defect better, like what to do with this defect better. But these are kind of very key, because this would be, if you didn't have any of the rest of this stuff, which, you know, ideally you would, but even if you didn't, these two things, if you end up having 100 bugs, are going to be super important for you and your team to understand what we're fixing first, what we're not fixing at all, what we're fixing later. And to quickly define this, so the severity of a defect is the impact that the defect will have on the user experience. So this is like, if the defect would occur to a real user, which happened just to us, how much would this impact us? What would we not be able to be using? How much a feature would not be available? Yeah, this is kind of this is the impact on the user experience. And the priority of a defect is the urge for the business to fix this. So how important this is for us as a team, as a company, to be fixing this bug. You could have cases where, to explain this concept a little bit better, yeah? So you could have cases where you have a high severity defect with a lower priority, yeah? So, and also just a small intermission in here, let me just say what I mean here by severity. This is literally just numeric value. So let's say we define severity 1 to be a blockers So this would, then we can define it different ways. So this would be normally something that interrupts severely interrupts the user experience and causes a large functionalities not to be available, let's say, yeah, at all. So and there would be also no workaround for this. There is no other way that we can access it. And this is kind of our case right now. So this is a website which is designed to show you some flashcards, and then you go through a quiz related to those websites. And neither the flashcards are accessible, nor the quiz is accessible. You can't, it returns the same error in here. So this is a pretty severe bug. For us, it would be a blocker issue, yeah? In the same way, you can have decreasing severity. So normally you would have 1 as a blocker, 2nd as a critical, 3rd as a major, and 4th as a minor cosmetic. Yeah, this is really arbitrary. Different companies can define this with different wording, but in a nutshell, this is the idea. So this, you describe the impact that the defect will have on the user experience. Yeah, so minor cosmetic. Okay. And this decreases this way. So if a blocker is something which interrupts a whole user flow and there is no workaround for that, a critical severity defect would be something which again causes severe impact on the user experience, but there is some sort of a still workaround, or there are maybe it doesn't basically make the whole function inaccessible for the user. It's still there, but it's still almost unusable. That would be the kind of the situation or the description of this severity. Then a major one would be something that, you know, kind of is an issue on the first step, but maybe you have a workaround. So say if you had a flashcards button in here, which you would click and it would return an error message like it does now, but let's say you had a flashcards button accessible somewhere else, and if you click on that one, then you still get to where you should go and you're still able to use the functionality. So that would be another one, like still kind of major impact on the user experience, but there is a workaround available and you can access the feature in another way. And a minor or a cosmetic defect would be something that doesn't really impact the user. Again, there's the word suggests in here, right? It doesn't impact, like it doesn't completely block the user experience, but it's still there. It's an issue. It's worth considering, but it's only of cosmetic nature. It's like something small on the UI. So for example, if we were to say we don't like the way this website looks right now, we would rather want it to be centered in here so that it would make more sense, and this part to be at the bottom, which most of the modern sites would really have, you basically are describing a defect which is only visual. It's more kind of a cosmetic thing. It's not harming any functionality or not causing any interruption to the user experience. That's with severity. And with priority, so this is the impact to the business. So what kind of impact is the business going to have, or how important it is for the business to be fixing this bug? This is not defined by the user experience really. This is more defined by the company who will be behind producing this website. And again, it will use a similar taxonomy. So we just, for the sake of it, we're going to say 1 critical, 2 or same here, we could just say 1 blocker, 2 critical, and then we just copy and paste these 2 guys in here. Cool. And what this is really, and how to understand the difference is, so what this is I kind of explained, but I want to explain why do we need to track these 2 fields, yeah, in here. So imagine you're rolling out a website like this, where flashcards is not a feature which you are expecting your users to be using starting the first day. It's like a secondary or third priority feature somewhere like at the bottom, which people are not going to use, or like 1% out of your 100,000 expected users are going to be using. If the issue still persists, if you click on this flashcards button and you still get this error message, the severity of this defect would still be a blocker because you're not able to access this feature at all and there is no workaround for it. But the priority to fix this defect for the team you're working in, or for the company, or for the business, would be way lower. It wouldn't be a blocker, because so long as all of the other features are working on this website and they are the main target of your business at this point in time, then the priority of this defect can be lower and you can decide to even fix it later. Fix it, I don't know, 1 year later, doesn't really matter. That's the whole reason. It basically balances the decisions that your team or your company will be making when it comes to deciding what to fix and what not to fix out of the 100 bugs that we now have, that our tester has found. That's really it. And then the taxonomy decreases in a similar way. So you would have a blocker priority, like let's say you have a massive issue, like the whole website isn't working, like you come here and instead of, you get an error message right on the home page. This would be a defect which has a blocker severity and it would have a blocker priority. So this would be like one of the first thing to fix, obviously, because then you're not getting any access, and then only you'll be able to see even the rest of the website to be able to even think about fixing more stuff or using more stuff, etc. That's pretty much it. So you can go through different priorities in here as well. So critical being a bit less priority for the business, a major, just in a similar way, kind of decreases. Companies will define this in different ways, but I just wanted for you guys to know this is one of the tricky questions that they ask during interviews. So please remember this very well, and we will visit this topic later on as well. Once we're using more tools, we're exploring some tools for defect management. Cool. And the very last thing I will mention in here would be kind of also meta information, would be a status. I'm going to bring it to the top. And we're not going to talk about this much today, just to keep this video a bit shorter. We will have a dedicated video for this one. But status of a defect is basically its state. So after this defect is raised, this will kind of be, think of this as this will be a new bug. Then this bug can get fixed. And then this bug can be can pass your testing, for example. I'm just making up the terminology in here now. We will explore like more standard terminology as I mentioned in a dedicated video, but just so you know. So this would be a status for you to track. So if you would have like 100 of these, you would somehow be able to know where, kind of what status this bug is in. Is it a new bug? Is it already with the developer? Or literally could be like that. So we could say with developer, etc. Yeah, cool. And just to pretty this up in the end a little bit before we close our topic of defects in here, I'm just gonna bring this meta information to the top, just so you see how the bug will look like in the end. We're gonna remove this. We could obviously apply some visual flair in here if we would want to, but not for this video. So we're gonna just say 1, 2 steps in here. We're gonna also bring our precondition at the top because we defined it, just like this, just in the description before the steps to reproduce. And now if I zoom out a little bit, this should start making a little bit more sense. One sec. Cool. So we're gonna say, yeah, and one other meta information in here could be the ID of your bug. Yeah, so we're gonna say ID. This is our 001 bug. This is our very first bug. Yeah, cool. So now, if you come, even if you reported this on a piece of paper, right? This would still be the same thing. It would convey enough information to whoever is going to be fixing this issue, so that they are able to reproduce this, understand what it's about, and be able to fix it. So you come here, you look at this, and you're like, okay, here is our meta information. We have a bug, and obviously you would have to highlight it. This I wrote in here just so that you know. So our bug in this case is a blocker bug. It has a blocker severity, and I would pretty much say it also has a blocker priority as well. So this is a highest severity, highest priority defect. because it doesn't just, the website just doesn't do what it's designed to, or this page doesn't do that. And then you have the summary in here. You have your description in here. You have your any other information. In this case, what we're left here is just our environment information and our screenshot. That's pretty much it, guys, with creating bugs. I hope this video was helpful. This is if you know this much, you're definitely going to be able to handle also any questions that come to you during an interview, and you will be able to correctly kind of process the information in your head before passing it on. So you go with summary of the bug, you go with the description of the bug, you go with and in the description you specify the steps, the observed result, the expected result, then you provide some additional information afterwards. This way there is nothing that you can miss, and regardless of the tool that you'll be using, you'll be definitely able to provide quality bug reports. Perfect. All right, so thanks a lot for following on this video. What we will do in the next video is we will go through the defects lifecycle, the lifecycle of a bug, and we will combine that with exploring a little bit specifically the bug creation aspect of a defect management tool. In this case, we will use Jira. It's a project management tool really, but we will use it to illustrate defect management. And this picture will start getting way more clearer once you start to understand how projects would be managing these kind of bugs. Stay tuned and wait for the next videos, and I'll be seeing you next week, guys.